Hello, everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
Story 1. The Lights Over. Ashevale, Ashevale was the kind of town that looked like it had been plucked out of a postcard from the 1970s and left to rot under the sun. A single main street cut through the middle, lined with faded shop signs and cracked sidewalks that told stories of better days. The people of Ashevale lived quiet lives, farmers, mechanics, and old couples who had never stepped outside the county lines. It was a town where everyone knew everyone, until the lights came. It started on a Tuesday night in early September. The sky above Ashevale shimmered faintly, as if the stars themselves were trembling. Some said it was the northern lights, though everyone knew that was impossible in southern Kansas. Others said it was just military testing from the base 2 counties over. But those who saw it up close, those who were awake at 2:17 a.m., swore it wasn't human. The lights hung above the tree line, moving with a rhythm, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Green, blue, then red. They hovered silently for nearly an hour before vanishing without a sound. And from that night on, Ashevale was never the same. 3 nights after the first sighting, the Peterson boy vanished. He was 12, last seen riding his bike home from the diner. His mother, Mrs. Peterson, reported hearing a high-pitched humming outside the house that night. By morning, the front door was open, the bike was on the porch, and her son was gone. Sheriff Don Harker, a man who'd seen 40 years of nothing but drunk fights and barn fires, didn't know what to make of it. The search dogs found no trail, and the ground showed no footprints past the porch. That same night, the lights came back. This time, the entire town saw them. Dozens of people stood out on their lawns, staring up as the lights circled silently over the old water tower. The air was thick and still, no wind, no sound. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the lights vanished. By morning, another person was gone. This time, it was a trucker passing through, who had stopped for gas at Ed's station. The clerk said he stepped outside to smoke and never came back. His rig sat there idling until dawn. The local paper ran the headline the next day, 2 missing after strange lights return to Ashevale. Most people thought it was coincidence, but deep down, everyone knew something was very wrong. Days turned into weeks. Every night, the lights came closer, no longer in the distance, but directly above the rooftops. Some people started hearing things on their radios too, static that whispered their names, a hum that pulsed like breathing. Then the power outages began. Entire blocks would lose power at 3 a.m. sharp. When it came back, clocks were all stuck at the same time, 2:17 a.m. Sheriff Harker called in help from the county, but their vehicles never made it into town. They'd break down just before the Ashevale city limits, radios filled with a strange shrill feedback that made their ears bleed. Phones stopped working next. Even cell signals died. It was as though something, or someone, didn't want them to call for help. By mid-October, Ashevale was a ghost town. The few who stayed reported seeing shadows moving behind the light, tall, spindly shapes that flickered in and out of visibility. And then came the recordings. Local teacher, Mrs. Eileen Morrow, found an old camcorder on her porch one morning. It was covered in ash and dust. Inside was a single tape labeled "Play Me." When she did, the video showed the missing Peterson boy standing in a field, staring blankly at the camera. Behind him, Faint lights pulsed in the fog. He didn't speak, just tilted his head as if listening to something. Then his mouth opened, and a low, static-filled voice came through. "They're not from the sky." The footage distorted violently before cutting out. Mrs. Morrow ran straight to Sheriff Harker's office with the tape. By the time he played it, the footage had changed. The boy was gone, and only white static remained. That night, Mrs. Morrow's house burned to the ground. No body was ever found. The last few survivors barricaded themselves in the church. Among them was Sheriff Harker, who kept a handwritten log of the town's final days. His entries grew more frantic by the hour. "The lights! They're not in the sky anymore. They're under the ground. The earth hums at night, voices in the walls. The old water tower glows now, no reflection in the glass. If anyone finds this, don't come to Asheville." The town breathes his final entry, dated November 3rd, simply read, "They're inside the light now." When state authorities finally arrived months later, the entire town of Asheville was empty. Cars sat abandoned, meals half-eaten. Television sets flickered with static, though no power ran through the grid. In the center of town, the water tower glowed faintly, red, blue, green, the same pulse as the lights. And if you stand beneath it long enough, you can still hear the hum. Story 2. The town that sleeps with eyes open. The first thing travelers noticed about Stillwell was the silence. No birds, no dogs barking, no wind rustling through the sycamores that lined the highway. Just a strange, thick quiet that made the world feel paused. The town sat in a valley of pale dust and yellowed grass, ringed by woods that locals called the Edge. The Edge was dense, too dense, its trees pressed against each other like a wall, letting in no sunlight. Those who drove through Stillwell rarely stopped. They said the town had an empty feeling, as if its people moved slowly, always watching. And they did watch. Always. Every window had faces behind it, pale, blank, and wide-eyed. Even in the dead of night, curtains stayed open, because the people of Stillwell did not close their eyes. Noah Barrett was a journalist from Wichita, looking for a quiet place to write after burning out from covering urban crime for years. He found a cheap rental online, a 2-bedroom house on Maple Lane, Stillwell, population 823. It looked normal in the pictures, small, peaceful, a white picket fence, a swing on the porch. He packed his bags and arrived one late evening in October. The sky was bruised purple when he crossed the rusted bridge into town. There was no welcome sign, just a crooked board that read, "Stillwell, founded 1899, rest easy." The last 2 words gave him a strange chill. He found the key taped to the mailbox, just like the landlord promised. Inside, everything was spotless, though a thick smell of disinfectant clung to the air. On the kitchen table lay a folded note. "Welcome to Stillwell, Mr. Barrett. Please don't be alarmed if people look in through your windows. It's just our way. No signature." Noah woke to a scratching sound around 2 a.m. He thought it was a raccoon, but when he peeked through the blinds, he froze. A woman stood in his yard, barefoot, wearing a long white nightdress. Her eyes were open wide, unblinking. The moonlight made them look glassy. She wasn't moving, just staring at his window. He shouted, "Hey!" No reaction. She turned her head slowly toward the road and walked away, stiffly, never blinking once. Noah didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, he went into town for breakfast. The diner was the only place open. Marty's Eats, painted in flaking red letters. Inside, a dozen townsfolk sat perfectly still, eating in silence. No chatter, no clinking of cups, just the soft scrape of utensils. When Noah walked in, everyone turned to look at him, all at once. Dozens of eyes, wide and motionless, fixed on him. The waitress, a woman in her 40s with deep shadows under her eyes, approached and smiled too wide. "Coffee?" she asked. Sure," Noah said, sitting by the window. She poured his cup, hands trembling slightly. "You're new," she said. "Just renting a place." "Quiet town," he replied. Her smile faltered. "Quiet's one word for it." When he asked about the woman he saw last night, the waitress froze. The whole diner seemed to stop moving. Then the cook spoke up from the kitchen window. "She was just walking." "People walk sometimes." The waitress quickly changed the topic. Noah noticed that nobody blinked the entire time he was there. Curiosity gnawed at him. That afternoon, he went to the Stillwell Library, a squat brick building that smelled of mildew. Inside, an elderly librarian named Miss Granger greeted him softly. Her eyes were bloodshot and watery. "Can I help you, dear?" "I'm writing a book," he lied. "I wanted to learn a bit about Stillwell's history." She hesitated before motioning him to a back room. "Not much to read. Fire took most of our records years ago. But..." She opened a locked drawer and handed him a single binder labeled Medical Reports 1899 to 1901. Inside were faded papers describing a sleeping sickness that had swept through Stillwell in its founding years. The illness caused paralysis, hallucinations, and eventually coma. One entry, signed by Dr. Edmund Kress, caught his eye. Patients who awaken show signs of ocular resistance. They refuse to close their eyes. They claim the dark is watching. Noah looked up at Miss Granger. Did people die from it? Her face twitched. Some did. The rest changed. Then, for the first time, he noticed she wasn't blinking either. A week later, flyers appeared around town. Annual Stillwell Night of Rest, October 31st, Town Square. The phrase made no sense. Night of rest in a town that never slept. Still, Noah went, camera in hand. The townsfolk gathered around a huge bonfire, faces glowing orange in the flames. Children stood beside parents, eyes open and expressionless. A preacher climbed onto the stage, his voice echoing through the still night. Brothers and sisters, tonight we keep the dark at bay. Tonight we watch. As they watch us, the crowd murmured rhythmically, "Keep them out! Keep them out! Keep them out!" Then the preacher blew out a lantern, and for one heartbeat, everything went black. When light returned, several people were gone. Nobody screamed. Nobody moved. The preacher just smiled and said, "The dark takes who it needs." Noah stumbled back, heart pounding. He snapped a picture, but when he checked his camera later, every photo was pure black. That night, Noah couldn't stop hearing whispers. It sounded like breathing through the vents, then like soft murmurs from behind the walls. He pressed his ear to the plaster and swore he heard voices chanting faintly, "Stay awake. Stay awake." At 3:14 a.m., the lights flickered. A reflection glimmered in the window, a pair of glowing eyes staring from inside the room. He spun around, nothing there. But when he looked back at the glass, he saw dozens of faint outlines behind him, eyes open, watching. He turned on every light in the house and sat on the floor, until sunrise, shaking. The next day, Noah confronted Ms. Granger at the library. "What's happening here?" he demanded. "Why don't you people ever blink?" She looked at him sadly. "We can't." Then she told him the truth. Back in 1899, the settlers of Stillwell had built the town over the site of an older village, a native burial ground for people who practiced something called the vigil. They believed in an ancient force that lived in the space between waking and sleeping, a shadow that entered dreams and hollowed people from the inside. The settlers dug up the burial mounds to build homes. Within months, people began falling into comas. Doctors found no cure. So the preacher at the time, Father Kress, the same man from the old reports, declared that the only way to survive was never to sleep again. He created a ritual, one that bound the townsfolk's souls between waking and dream. Their bodies stayed alive, but they could never rest. Stillwell became a town of watchers, eyes open, always guarding against the thing beneath the dark. "It feeds when we close our eyes," Ms. Granger whispered. "So we don't." Noah felt sick. "That's impossible." She looked up at him, tears welling in her bloodshot eyes. "Then don't blink, Mr. Barrett. Not tonight." Naytewan. That night, Noah decided to leave. He packed his car and started toward the bridge. But the moment he reached the edge of town, fog rolled in, thick and black as oil. The headlights cut through nothing. The road behind him vanished. The air vibrated with a low hum, like the sound of 100 people whispering in unison. Shapes moved within the fog, human outlines, eyes gleaming faintly. They stepped closer, forming a circle around his car. Noah slammed the gas, but the tires spun uselessly. Something heavy struck the windshield. A pale face pressed against the glass, eyes wide open, whispering, "Sleep." Then dozens more faces appeared, whispering the same word, "Sleep, sleep, sleep." The fog seeped through the vents, cold and damp, filling his lungs. His eyelids grew heavier. He tried to fight it, but every time he blinked, he saw flashes, bodies buried under the town, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide even in death. He blacked out. When Noah opened his eyes, he was lying on a hospital bed. The ceiling was white, the lights dim. A nurse entered, smiling gently. "Good to see you awake, Mr. Barrett." "Where am I?" "Stillwell Memorial." His chest tightened. "How long have I been out?" She hesitated. 3 days. He sat up sharply. 3 days? She nodded slowly. "Don't worry. We kept your eyes open." Noah froze. She turned toward the window and drew the curtains open. Outside, the town looked exactly the same. Quiet, still. But on every building, every wall, he saw them. Murals of wide-eyed faces staring outward, hundreds of them, as if the town itself was watching. Then he noticed the nurse hadn't blinked once. Neither had the doctor standing behind her. And when Noah looked into the mirror beside his bed, he realized neither had he. Weeks passed, and Noah stopped trying to leave. The fog always returned if he drove too far. His articles remained unwritten. The typewriter keys gathered dust. At night, he stood at the window like everyone else, eyes open, staring into the woods. Sometimes he thought he saw figures standing between the trees, tall and thin, faces pale and smooth, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. He learned to stop asking questions. The townsfolk said, once you saw them, you became part of the watch. because if Stillwell ever closed its eyes, the thing beneath would wake again. And so, the people watched. Forever. 2 years later, hikers found a camera buried in mud 10 miles outside Stillwell. The footage showed Noah Barrett sitting by his window, eyes wide open, whispering into the lens, "If you find this, don't stop here. Don't rest. Don't blink." The final frame lingered for 30 seconds, his face motionless, pupils dilated, before the screen faded to black. In the reflection of the window behind him, a shadow moved, tall, thin, with no eyes at all. Story 3. The Old Water Tower Whispers. Briar Hollow sat on the edge of nowhere, a small logging town carved from the woods of northern Maine. There were no streetlights outside the square, and the mist clung low like a living thing. The only sound at night was the hum of insects and the occasional groan of the old water tower that rose over the pines. The tower was the tallest structure for miles, built in 1924, its iron ribs black with rust. Locals said you could hear whispers from inside it on windless nights, voices that didn't belong to anyone alive. Children were warned never to climb it. Teenagers dared each other to. Adults never spoke of it at all, because everyone in Briar Hollow knew what happened to those who listened too closely. Evelyn Ward was a sound engineer from Boston who came to Briar Hollow to record natural ambience for a horror film. She'd been hired to capture real atmosphere, the kind that couldn't be faked in a studio. The town's remoteness made it perfect. She rented a cabin near the tree line and spent her days walking through the woods with her field recorder, collecting hours of wind, leaves, and distant thunder. On her first night, while labeling her audio, she noticed something strange. Between two recordings, one of the forest and one of the town square, there was a faint sound that didn't belong. A whisper. So soft, she almost missed it. "Help!" She replayed it 3 times, boosting the gain. The voice was male, trembling, buried beneath the rustle of trees. She made a note. Unexplained whisper, 1:17 a.m., source unknown. The next morning, Evelyn visited the diner for breakfast. The locals watched her quietly as she ordered a dozen pairs of eyes that didn't seem friendly or curious, just cautious. When she mentioned the water tower, the room went silent. An old man sitting at the counter turned to her. His face was lined like cracked bark. "You recording that thing?" Evelyn smiled awkwardly. "Maybe. It's got a great acoustic shape. I thought the wind through the iron." "Don't," he said flatly. The waitress, a tired woman named May, leaned in. "That tower doesn't make sounds. It takes them." Evelyn frowned. "Takes them?" May nodded. "Every sound you hear up there, it's a voice that got stuck." Evelyn laughed nervously. "Like ghosts?" May didn't laugh back. "Like people who shouldn't have listened." That night, curiosity got the better of her. She drove out to the tower just before midnight. The air was heavy with fog, her flashlight cutting through it in short beams. The tower loomed above, skeletal against the moon. A faded sign at the base read, "No trespassing. Town property. Danger of collapse." She pressed record on her field mic and began climbing. The ladder rattled beneath her hands, flaking rust into the air. Halfway up, she paused. There it was again. A whisper. "Leave." She froze. The voice was right beside her ear, close enough to feel breath. She swung her light around, nothing but fog and steel. Her pulse hammered. "Hello?" Silence. Then another whisper, lower this time. You shouldn't be here. Evelyn's rational mind told her it was wind resonating through the tower's hollow frame, an auditory illusion. She climbed higher. At the top, she found the hatch unlocked. Inside, the metal chamber echoed faintly, drops of condensation falling like clock ticks. She placed her microphone in the center and whispered softly into it. Testing. Briar Hollow Water Tower. 12:41 a.m. The playback came instantly. But when she heard it through her headphones, her blood ran cold. Her voice was there. Then a second one right after, "She's here!" Evelyn raced home, terrified but fascinated. She transferred the audio to her laptop, isolating frequencies, filtering noise. Beneath the static, she discovered layers. Not one voice, but dozens. Men, women, children, all whispering over one another like a chorus trapped underwater. She could make out fragments. The well. Don't let him out. It's still hungry. At exactly 2:03 a.m., the whispering stopped. Then a single voice, deep and hollow, said, "We wait for the thirsty." Evelyn's skin crawled. She shut her laptop and went to bed, trying to convince herself it was just old radio interference. But that night, she dreamed of standing at the top of the tower again, only this time the hatch led downward, a spiral staircase sinking into black water. And from below, voices called her name. The next morning, she went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Clay Donovan was a broad, weary man who looked like he'd seen too much. When she played him the recording, his face went pale. He took off his hat and rubbed his temples. "You shouldn't have gone up there." "Why?" "What's up there?" Evelyn asked. He hesitated, then sighed. Briar Hollow used to have 2 water towers. The old one was built over an abandoned well, the Whisper Well, they called it. Back in the 1800s, a drought hit hard. Townsfolk prayed, dug deeper, begged the earth for water. One night, a preacher led a ritual, said he'd call on the well spirit to fill it again. Evelyn leaned in. And? Next morning, the well was full, Donovan said quietly, but the preacher and 6 others were gone. And the water tasted wrong. People who drank it said they heard voices under their beds at night. He looked at her with tired eyes. The tower was built right over it. Nobody's supposed to go near. You hear whispers, you stop listening. Evelyn should have left town then. But obsession has a sound, and she could hear it humming under her skin. 2 nights later, she went back. This time she brought a parabolic mic, a thermal camera, and backup batteries. The air was colder than before. The tower's iron beams creaked like old bones. At 1:11 a.m., she pressed record again. The whispering started immediately, louder this time, clear words shaping through the static. "Feed the well. One must fall." Her light flickered. Through her headphones, she heard something else, a sound beneath the voices. Dripping. Then, footsteps climbing from below the hatch. She turned off the recorder, heart racing. "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Then a voice that sounded exactly like her own replied, "I am." The flashlight went out. Evelyn screamed, stumbling down the ladder. Her recorder fell, clattering into the dark. When she reached the ground and looked back, she saw someone, or something, leaning over the railing at the top, head tilted unnaturally, hair hanging straight down. It whispered her name. The next morning, Sheriff Donovan found her car abandoned near the tower. No sign of Evelyn, just her recorder lying in the grass, still running. He took it back to his office and listened. The first 2 hours were wind and faint creaks. Then came Evelyn's breathing, her voice, the whispers, and finally, something else. A splash. Then her voice, distant and echoing, calling for help. The last sound on the tape was gurgling, like water rising, followed by a deep, rhythmic whisper, "Another for the well." Donovan locked the recorder in an evidence box and buried it under a floorboard in his office. A month later, Briar Hollow began losing people. First a teenager, then a farmer, then a deputy. Each disappearance followed the same pattern. Their voices were heard at night through the drain pipes, whispering from the faucets. One family recorded their kitchen sink dripping and swore they heard a man's voice in every drop saying, "Please, I'm still here." The sheriff tried to seal the tower, but every morning the locks were gone, melted like wax. Soon, even the rain began whispering. By December, most of the town had left. Sheriff Donovan stayed behind with a handful of others, determined to end it. They climbed the tower with barrels of cement, planning to seal the hatch for good. He recorded the attempt on his body cam. The footage, later found by state police, shows them reaching the top, voices murmuring below. One man, Deputy Hill, leaned too close to the hatch. Something pulled him in, fast, silent, like the air itself sucked him under. The camera shakes violently, screams echo, then silence. The video ends with Donovan's voice gasping, "It's full of faces in the water." Then a whisper over his own words, "You belong to the hollow." Naunun? When authorities arrived weeks later, Briar Hollow was deserted. The tower stood alone, silent, the hatch sealed with rust. But if you placed your ear to the metal, you could still hear faint knocking from the inside. Evelyn's name was carved into the base, along with dozens of others, dates stretching back a century. The sheriff's cruiser was found parked nearby. Inside, the radio crackled endlessly with static that sometimes shaped into words. "Feed the well." 2 years later, Evelyn's final recordings were released anonymously online. The files were titled Briar_Hollow_Field, audio 01 to 06. Listeners reported strange things, whispers repeating their own names through headphones, sudden drops in temperature while playing the files, dreams of drowning in dark water with eyes staring up from beneath the surface. The last file ended with a soft, distant voice, unmistakably Evelyn's. "The tower isn't empty. It's listening. And if you boost the audio past the distortion just before the file cuts out, you can hear the faint splash of something surfacing. Then a whisper, 'Your turn.'"
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe.